Hey everybody, Dean Benard here with the next episode of Take 5. And today I want to talk to you about recording investigative interviews. Now there's been a lot of controversy over the last, say, 10 years on this, particularly in areas outside of criminal investigations. I think on criminal investigations, the police have pretty well established the fact that, any kind of significant interview is going to be recorded. But in other parts of the investigative world, workplace investigations, regulatory investigations, there are still people who feel that, interviewing or recording interviews is not a great idea. I'm not one of them. I think that recording interviews is the gold standard. It is what we need to be doing. When you think about it, there are a lot of times where people can very easily say that the things that you said in an interview, the things that they said in an interview didn't happen. They changed their story. And that doesn't happen all the time. But when it does, you're pretty darn thankful if you have a recorded version of the interview. It's really the final arbiter of any kind of disagreement around what was said. Now, over the years, I've heard lots of excuses and reasons why we shouldn't record interviews. And the big one that I hear the most is this idea that, people will be too reluctant to share information if they're being recorded. Now, I would argue that people are reluctant to share information many times, whether it's being recorded or not. And if you're a skilled interviewer, you'll be able to get people past that. When you explain to people why you're doing it, that it's for accuracy, when you explain to them who's going to see it and what it's going to be used for, people gain a better understanding. When you do proper rapport building, people will relax, people will often be just fine with it. In fact, I can tell you that in all the interviews that we do, and I have a team of people who are doing interviews every day, rarely, very rarely do we have somebody who refuses to be interviewed. And if they refuse, no problem. We're not going to make a fuss about it. We're going to let them refuse. We'll just document that they refused, and we'll go back to the old-fashioned way of doing things, which is taking notes and then having them review those notes and sign off on them. Now, one thing I will say, if you are interviewing, you still want to be taking notes because you never know when technology will fail you. And if that happens, you'll be awfully upset if at the end of a 2-hour interview, you've got no recording and no notes and you're back to square one. So, always take notes regardless of whether you're recording the interview, but it isn't going to be a replacement for recording. Now, I've heard all the arguments against it. I've heard people say, again, people would be reluctant. I've heard them say, the investigator's caught on tape too, and what if the investigator says something they shouldn't say? Well, my first response to that is investigators shouldn't be saying things they shouldn't say. A skilled investigator won't do that. We all make mistakes, though. If we say something that we shouldn't have said, well, so be it. So the argument being what? If it was said and it wasn't recorded, you could deny saying it. Where's the integrity there? So from my perspective, if an investigator makes a mistake and that's captured on a recording, well, so be it. But if you're a good investigator, that really shouldn't happen. I've heard people say, we have to create transcripts of all these things, and it's going to be hours of work to create all these transcripts with lots of ums and ahs in them, and not all the information's relevant. You don't have to do a transcript for every recording. Sure, if a case goes to a tribunal, if it goes to a hearing, court, an arbitration, in those cases, maybe you are going to go ahead and transcribe it. But for the other 90% plus of cases, there will never be a need to transcribe it. You use it like you would rough notes. You take from it the relevant information, you summarize it, you put it in your report, and if there's ever any question, the recording is there. If it escalates to something more significant like a hearing or a tribunal, well, no problem. We've got the recordings, we can have them transcribed. And in those circumstances, you'll probably be happy you have them. So again, not a really good reason not to record interviews. Now, I will say this, a few things. One, never record without somebody's permission. Always make sure the person being interviewed has said, yes, I'm okay with being recorded, and that you actually capture that acknowledgement on the recording. So I usually have a short conversation with the person just to say, listen, I want to record this. Here's why I want to do it. I make sure that they're comfortable with it. And then I start the recording, and it would start off something like, today is October 18th, 2022. I am here with Mr. or Ms. or so-and-so. They are here to talk about X, Y, and Z. Just for the record, Ms. So-and-so, you have agreed to be recorded for the purposes of this interview or for this interview. They say, yes, I have, and off you go. Before you know it, everyone's going to forget that the recording is even there. You just conduct your interview like you normally would, and it usually goes very, very well. Like I said, we've had very few issues with people not wanting to share information, and very few issues with people refusing to be interviewed in the first place. So again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of recording. Yes, there can be arguments that might dissuade one from recording an interview, but I would say that all of those arguments are easily dealt with, and that the benefits far outweigh any of the risks or problems that people might commonly associate with recording. So record your interviews. It's best practice in my opinion, and I wish you all the best. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on Take 5.